What does the separation of church and state actually mean? Let's pour some coffee on that. Hello everyone, this is Father Brad Doyle, and you are watching Coffee Talk, where we sit in sanctuaries and bask in the Eucharistic presence and don't drink coffee. Until next week, we'll probably drink coffee. You might hear it say all the time. It's said in blogs, on, in Facebook combox wars, like separation of church and state. What does that mean? Where did it come from? A lot of people take that to mean that, let's say, a Catholic politician has the duty as a citizen and a politician to separate their personal faith from their civic and public duty. Let me expound upon that with an example. Let's say there's a Catholic politician. Some people think that that Catholic politician that might be personally opposed to abortion has to separate or divide within themselves their Catholicism, their personal ideas and their personal conscience, and their voting, their leadership, their civic duty, and therefore must vote for abortion if their constituents desire that. Is that what separation of church and state means? I don't think so. Let's explain. Number one, we have to know where it came from. Where does the terms or the phrase separation of church and state come from? It's not found in the Constitution, actually. It came from a letter written by Thomas Jefferson in 1802, so pretty early on in our country's founding, to the Dansbury Baptist Church. And in the letter, he was actually striving to make sure that the church knew that their religious liberties would be protected. I'll read a little here. Believing with you that religion is a matter which lies solely between man and his God, that he owes account to none other for his faith or his worship, that the legitimate powers of government reach actions only and not opinions, I contemplate with sovereign reverence that act of the whole American people which declared that their legislature should, and this is where he's quoting the Constitution, make no law respecting an establishment of religion or prohibiting the free exercise thereof. Thus, this is where he invents the term or popularized the term, thus building a wall of separation between church and state. In its context, he's talking about protecting the church from the state. Here's the history. These people remember an England that had an actual state religion, Anglicanism, the Church of England, in which the state declared one religion, one faith, to be the state religion. And that's what the Founding Fathers want to move away from. Not religious people, but a state that codifies one religion. Thus we see in the First Amendment, make no law respecting an establishment of a religion or prohibiting the free exercise thereof. In essence, Thomas Jefferson used the phrase separation of church and state as an interpretation of the First Amendment in order to protect the free exercise of religion, making sure that individual citizens and even politicians can express their faith and live their faith without hindrance from the government. For the Founding Fathers, there was a wall in between church and state, but the wall was surrounding the church. The wall was surrounding individuals' faith so that the state could not affect it, not the other way around. So how then do we accurately interpret and put into practice the First Amendment and its paraphrase, the separation of church and state? This protection is a good thing, but it should be seen as separating an established church from the influence of the government, not separating a person from their faith. That latter thing's called dualism, where we split the person into two, and the person's not acting with integrity. What is a person's conscience separated from the morality that informs it? We cannot separate morality from legislation. We can't have an amoral legislation, a legislation that isn't affected by the morals of the people. It is literally the morals of the people that inform legislation. Every legislation is a moral thing. From you go to jail if you steal from people because it's wrong, down to things like taxation breaks for people in gentrifying areas because in order to help protect their property that they've lived on for many years because the property value is going up. I mean, things like that. That's a moral issue. People believe, and it is true, especially through the Catholic social doctrine, that we ought to protect those who are poor. It's called the preferential option for the poor. All these things are moral issues. So there's no legislation. The very fact of legislation is saying that one thing is wrong, another thing isn't. We do the right and we don't do the bad. So what is a politician detached from their own conscience, detached from the morality that they believe is good or bad? It's not a good politician. So it is true that a Catholic's belief about strictly divinely revealed things like the incarnation or the infallibility of the second letter of St. Peter, like obviously those things are not to be legislated on. But things like abortion, right, murder, or genetic modification of embryos, these things a Catholic and any person of goodwill can legislate on morally, not based on divine revelation alone, but based on what's called the natural law. The ability of every human person, because of what's written on their heart and on their soul and the shared human experience, a morality, a truth that's shared for all people. A Catholic ought not put that aside. So to take the analogy or the example that we started with, a Catholic voting in support of abortion is not a Catholic respecting the separation of church and state. Instead, it's a Catholic allowing society and the state to separate them from their faith.